As part of our book festival coverage, Book TV attended the 2018 National Press Club Book Fair, where we spoke with Texas A&M history professor Adam Costanzo about the origins of the nation's capital.
Adam Costanzo is a history professor at Texas A&M University at Corpus Christi and is the author of a recent book, George Washington's Washington, Visions for the National Capital in the Early American Republic. Mr. Costanzo, when was our nation's capital moved from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C.?
The capital comes to Washington, D.C. in 1800, in the last year of John Adams' presidency, and Jefferson's the first president to be inaugurated here.
In your book, you talk about Washington's Washington, a play of alliteration. What does that mean? What was Washington's plan all along? Now, he was initially governing out of New York City, is that correct?
Yeah, Washington does, and then Philadelphia. Washington's Washington is an idea of talking about the idea itself of Washington, D.C. George Washington and the other Federalists' vision for the city itself. What they wanted out of it, what they wanted it to look like, what they saw its role was in setting the new nation.
What did they see, and why a swamp in between Maryland and Virginia?
Well, they saw much more than a swamp. It wasn't all that swampy. Most places are pretty muddy at that time. We end up here between Virginia and Maryland because the agreement to put the city along the Potomac River was then handed over to George Washington to choose the location. And Washington chose the location basically closest to his home and closest to the city you might call the closest to his hometown in Alexandria. We end up here at a new place where there isn't an existing city, so that the federal government can be separate from any of the particular states and separate from any other existing polities or political machinations of individual cities or towns.
If you've been to our nation's capital, you'll know that Mount Vernon, where Washington's home is probably about 10 or 15 minutes outside of town, so very close. What did D.C. look like in 1800?
Not much. They produced the Grand Plan, the L'Enfant Plan, very early on, 1791. L'Enfant produces his plan, and that really encapsulates Washington's vision for a grand national capital. But by 1800, when they moved the capital here, very little of that actually exists. The plan is there, some roads are here and there, some buildings are here and there. There's probably only about 100 brick buildings, or non-shacks, in the city in 1800. The Capitol building and the White House are each maybe half built. They're capable of handling the government, but they're not nearly done. And it's going to take the city a long time to develop, and that's a lot of the story I tell in the book.
Was there resistance from New York and Philadelphia, knowing they would be losing the nation's capital?
There's some. The Northeast Corridor wanted to keep the capital. We think of D.C. now as part of the Northeast Corridor, so I guess it wins in the end. But they think all along, partly, that really maybe it'll never leave. Maybe they won't be willing to move to the woods and have a capital, to leave all of the comforts of Philadelphia. But they manage to. They do it, and they stick it out for the duration.
Adam Costanzo, he's a professor of history at Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, and he's the author of this book, George Washington's Washington, Visions for the National Capital in the Early American Republic. It's published by University of Georgia Press. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Keep an eye out for more interviews from the National Press Club's book fair to air in the near future. You can also watch them and any of our programs in their entirety at booktv.org. Type the author's name in the search bar at the top of the page.